Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from this week in December 1919. It was a week of road complaints. Log trailer breaks through Deep Creek Bridge, no lives are lost. What might easily have been a serious accident was avoided purely by luck when a log trailer belonging to the White House Barrel Company broke through Deep Creek Bridge late Monday afternoon. The accident occurred when two rotten bridge stringers gave way. This accident is but one of a series that have occurred on that bridge during the past few weeks, all of them resulting from rotten or defective boards and timbers. As yet, no serious accident resulting in injury to persons or loss of life has occurred, but it is only a matter of time, unless the bridge is repaired in a proper manner without delay before something serious takes place. The bridge is of the flimsiest construction to begin with. It is built of timbers too light to carry the loads which pass over it, and the rotting of those timbers has created a condition which would not be allowed to exist at all in many parts of the state. At present, conditions are such that local citizens are growing decidedly nervous over the bridge, and more than one drives across it in a spirit of fear. With the bridge in danger of breaking through at any moment and carrying with it a vehicle, perhaps loaded with people, the outlook is not regarded as cheerful by the Hastings people. Road complaints come in from Spud's neighborhood. Complaints are coming from farmers living in and near Spud settlement regarding the road from that place to Deep Creek, which they say is in an impassable condition. According to statements made by farmers from the locality, the county road force has been at work in their vicinity for a period of about 4 weeks, using a tractor, a road grader, 2 disc plows, and 12 convicts. The road, they say, was ditched partway, plowed up thoroughly, and left in that condition, the machinery and workmen having been taken to some other place. To add to their troubles, they report, the roads through the woods are badly cut up and filled with bog holes, varying from 6 inches to 2 feet in depth. The result is that the farmers in that section are completely cut off from the outside, being unable to haul fertilizer or do any of the transportation work so vital at this time of year. This week, the road woes even got the attention of the editorial desk, with this article titled, "Travelers Forced to Take Winding Detour, Number of Cars Stuck in Mud, and Many Cuss Words Uttered." During the closing days of last week, Hastings and vicinity experienced a recurrence to the good old times when roads ambled aimlessly through the woods and were composed of whatever substance chanced to be in the line of their progress. The consensus of opinion regarding the result of the experiment seems to be the effect that no matter how satisfactorily such roads may have been in the days when the chief mode of locomotion was muleback, it is a flat failure in these days of automobiles. The cause of the experience was the closing of the St. Augustine Road at a point beyond Elkton for the purpose of repairing a bridge. First reports based on the length of time taken in the operation indicated repairs on nothing less than a steel bridge about the size of the toll bridge into Palatka. But later reports were more conservative and brought the size of the bridge down to a small wooden structure, the size little beyond the chicken type. However, Hastings citizens and many others had their experience and will presumably remember it for some time to come. The detour over which they were forced to travel twisted and turned snake fashion through meadows and woods for a distance which is said to have been 2.5 miles. Those who traveled it, however, disagree vociferously with that measurement, placing it at least 10 miles beyond that point. At any rate, its course was chosen with great care and included one ford, not of the wheeled type, and a fine selection of assorted mud holes here and there, with a sandbank thrown in for good measure. People native to this section or who have been here long enough to have learned how to navigate difficult roads when occasion demanded contrived to worry through, although in some cases their remarks would have badly strained the relationships between themselves and their pastors. At frequent intervals, however, cars bearing stout and complacent northerners accustomed only to the smoothest of roads would come jouncing through the detour, the passengers hanging on for dear life and wearing expressions of deepest pain and horror. It is hinted that, as a result, liniment sales in the local drugstores picked up amazingly last week. Nightfarers found themselves in even worse predicaments. Stalled and damaged cars became common, and it was found not impossible to even miss the road entirely and go sauntering off through the woods. 2 prominent local citizens shared this sad fate and spent an entire night watching for the sunrise and trying to outdo each other in expressions of opinions relative to the road and those responsible for its enforced use. Even bus traffic was interrupted, the bus being obliged to spend considerable of its time extricating itself and other cars from mud holes. When the announcement was made later Saturday afternoon that the road would open up at 6 o'clock, a sigh of relief went up that was mistaken in the vicinity for a rising gale. In other news in this week's edition, a timely rescue. Aubrey Davis, son of Mr. and Mrs. Roy P. Davis, and Oscar Thomas, the nephew of Mr. and Mrs. O.B. Smith, met with an accident out in the heavy bay Saturday afternoon which might have been rather serious if they had not been picked up by Captain Herbert Banta on the Pauline, which was making one of her usual trips. The boys were out in a small boat which is equipped with a sail, and they struck a head tide out in the channel. Desiring to get the sail down and make progress without it, they struggled for a few minutes until caught by a side puff of wind. The boat capsized, throwing the boys into the water. Both lads can swim, but it was a difficult proposition for them Saturday with their heavy winter clothing. One lad wore an overcoat, the other, for extra equipment, had on a pair of heavy rubber boots. They were able to scramble up on top of the boat, and Captain Banta, who had passed them a few minutes before and was a witness to the accident, came to their rescue. The boys were more than glad to be removed from their somewhat uncomfortable and perilous position, where they were crouched, chilled, and shivering, and were brought back to town, little worse for their dunking, although a good deal frightened when they considered how serious the accident might have been. Post office normal again. Postmaster W.B. Leonard reports that the annual Christmas rush in the local post office is about over. The movement of packages through the local post office this year was about the same as last year, although the great bulk of shipments out were made extremely late, which went far toward causing the great congestion which the local office suffered. As an interesting side note, the modern post office here in Hastings reported a banner year of Christmas packages being shipped this year. One day alone, they saw 1,100 parcels come through. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to many years ago. As we prepare to enter a new year, how about a song we all equate with this time of year? Auld Lang Syne. But where did the song come from, and why do we sing it to mark the new year? The song came from Scotland, and the first full written account of it as a song is connected to Robert Burns, the national poet of Scotland. In 1788, Burns said he had written down the words of an old song from an old man he heard singing it. It's believed what he copied down was the first verse and the chorus. Then he penned additional verses himself. There were earlier versions of parts of that first verse of the song written down as early as 1711 by James Watson, but the complete song as we know it is believed to have come from Burns. The first versions of the song were in the Old Scots language, where the words in the title, Auld Lang Syne, translate to old long since, or more casually meaning for old time's sake. While it had an earlier tune, it was one Burns himself even called mediocre, and the tune that we know today was attached to the song in 1799. The Scots began the tradition of singing Auld Lang Syne as part of the Scottish New Year's celebration of Hogmanay, where they would hold hands in a circle and sing it together. As Scottish immigrants traveled the world, the song and tradition of singing it for the new year went with them. But it was a band leader that made it go mainstream. Guy Lombardo had a popular radio and TV show that aired for decades starting in 1929. And each year, as the clock struck midnight, he had his band play Auld Lang Syne. As it was what most North Americans were listening to, it became a tradition far and wide. Guy Lombardo's recording of it is still played every year in New York City as the ball drops in Times Square. While usually we listen to old versions of a song in these musical memories, this week I'm offering you a relatively new recording, one I did. Here's yours truly singing Auld Lang Syne with my friend Jim Spence accompanying on guitar. Should old acquaintance be forgot, that never
See